Good morning. Welcome everyone to another episode of Inter Perspectives. My name is Prashant, and today we are going to speak with Muhammad Ali Khan and Dr. Sharma about a very disturbing development which has been evolving in India right now. Uh, as some of you may have come across, news related to an amendment with regard to India's Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act. Before I bring our guests in, I would like to just set the context about some of the major changes that have been brought about in this particular law and why it is so concerning. To start off, maybe it will be helpful to take note of where the journey of transgender rights in India actually began. And everything traces to the year to 2014 when the Indian Supreme Court delivered a judgment called Nalsa versus Union of India. It recognized transgender persons as a legal identity, recognize the concept of gender identity and sex characteristics and sexual orientation. So this was welcome judgment, and among many things, judgment also recognized the right to self-determination of gender identity. So that was one of the most significant, um, findings of the court. Secondly, it also recommended the government to actually come up with the rights-based legislation. And while it took a lot of time and several rounds of consultation between the transgender community and the Indian government, in 2020, we saw the enactment of the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act. While the law was supposed to be based on the ruling of the Nalsa judgment, it did deviate from it a little bit, actually a lot, and hence there were mass protests against the law as well. And when the subsequent rules came out from that particular parent law, they also were quite troubling because they were going against the substance of the judgment of Nalsa. Still, I mean, because the law for the first time actually gave some specific, recognize certain rights of the transgender people, and in a troubling way, it also tried to extend some protection to intersex persons, although the approach which the law took of clubbing trans and intersex within one definitional umbrella and then setting out the rights, it didn't do as good as it would have been possible. But nonetheless, it did have certain strong protections. It did actually recognize the right to self-determination of gender identity, and therefore while the law was, being opposed, it was being challenged in court. Still, it did, have some semblance of protection for transgender people. However, last month, the Indian government, out of nowhere, without any consultation as such with the community, with people who were part of, the National Council for Transgender Persons, which is supposed to actually advise the government on what kind of reforms to bring in, without engaging with folks like Dr. Sharma, who are part of a committee appointed by the Supreme Court of India, to suggest recommendations for this particular law. None of the measures have been taken up. And still, we see that without any consultation, an amendment comes in which, goes against the spirit of the Nalsa judgment and lays down several concerning procedures, several violative procedures which came as a shock to everyone, given the kind of relative progress that we were noticing, and perhaps India was actually championing the rights, of transgender people in an era where transgender rights are under attack from all sorts of places. So this is a very concerning development, and to unpack this a little more, I have with me Muhammad Ali Khan, who's an intersex person, coordinates the Intersex Advocacy Consortium, and also is the Advocacy and Network Engagement Officer at Youth Voices Count. Momo has also been a fellow with Intersex Asia. He's been part of our fellowship program. And we also have Dr. Sanjay Sharma, who's a medical doctor by profession after a distinguished career in the armed forces. Dr. Sharma is currently the managing director of Association of Transgender Health in India. Is doing a phenomenal work in the space with regard to advancing healthcare rights of of the community. And last year, Dr. Sharma was also appointed within a committee constituted by the Supreme Court of India in the landmark judgment of Jane Kaushik versus Union of India, which dealt with employment-based discrimination, but the court also recognized the systemic violations that were going on and hence constituted this committee. And until this amendment came in, we were all very much hopeful and looking forward to the work of the committee. But sadly, things have taken a hit on that note. But with this broader background, let me start with perhaps Mohammed. We are kind of setting the clock back. As I wrote in 2019 in one of the articles that this particular enactment is when the bill was presented or shared publicly. I wrote an editorial piece saying that this is setting the clock back on intersex rights because we had just seen the Madras High Court judgment, we had the Nalsa judgment. We are seeing an upward progression, but yeah, it started to turn the clock back. Now we are seeing a very disturbing trend that there is now supposed to be a district medical board, and which is now going to actually monitor this entire process. In a way, this actually solidifies the pathologization trap, which is very much baked in within our legal system as well as healthcare system. So, how do you see the impact of this particular, amendment on the intersex community, perhaps more specifically?
Thank you so much, Roshan, for that question and for this platform and to Intersex Asia as well. I think the trap part of it is very complex to sort of navigate because I believe the law is creating a lot of unequal access to and right-based approaches for intersex people. Many intersex people, they do not have access to old medical records, diagnostic testing, specialist doctors, or healthcare systems that rely on, capable or proving biological variations. Rural, poor, disabled people, marginalized people, and intersex people who are within those, systems, they are disproportionately impacted because recognition is now tied to the access of medical infrastructure rather than constitutional rights. This is what we are saying, what is happening. So this framework, what it is doing, that it is undermining what I believe is at the core idea of what bodily autonomy looks like, at what privacy looks like. Now, to satisfy a medical board, individuals, intersex individuals or endosex people may feel pressurized to disclose their intimate details about their bodies, something that information that government or previously any medical board or doctors did not have. Details like about their chromosomes, hormones, surgeries, the genitalia they have, or about their reproductive anatomy and decisions that they have taken for themselves. This is an invasion of privacy that no other citizen in India is routinely required to undergo in order to have their identity respected by the state. Now, this requirement is harmful because it is now creating a hierarchy of legitimacy within the trans and intersex communities. So, those who can create or produce clinical evidence in the eyes of law are now authentic, while those without the documentation risk a lot of exclusion, denial of protections, and the disbelief. So this is turning the identity of people into something that is conditional, bureaucratic, rather than being a lived and self-determined aspect. So another concern that I really carry in myself right now is the district magistrate and the medical board themselves do not possess the adequate understanding of what intersex variations look like. Because we know that intersex traits are medically diverse, they're socially complex, and very often poorly understood even within the healthcare systems. Many doctors in India receive little to no training, and Dr. Sanjay can also emphasize more on that aspect. Little to no training on intersex realities beyond what outdated pathologizing frameworks that exist. And as a result, that these decision makers may rely solely on binary assumptions of sex, reproductive anatomy, chromosomes, or appearance, which is a major factor here, on evaluating whether a person qualifies as an intersex person or not. Now, what happens is that this is creating a very dangerous situation where recognition does not rely on medical evidence, but also on personal biases of these officials, their ignorance, or their limited expertise that is coming in through. So different, and my fear is also that different districts may apply different standards to what leading to what I believe is arbitrary or inconsistent outcomes. Some individuals may be rejected simply because their variation is not understood enough, or it is invisible, undocumented, or was surgically altered in childhood, or just does not fit the stereotypical expectation of what an intersex body should look like. So, lastly, to say that in practice, this is going to turn intersex existence into something that has to be constantly explained, defended, and medically performed before the administrative authorities, who may lack the knowledge, sensitivity, and limited understanding which is necessary to make these decisions or determinations fairly. Most importantly, what we are going to see is that the law is going to revive the very dangerous idea that intersex variations are medical anomalies, abnormalities that must be certified by experts before the society can acknowledge them. So this is fundamentally, as we know, incompatible with modern human rights approaches, which is now, as we see globally, is increasingly recognizing that intersex people should not have to go undergo pathologizing diagnosis or institutional approval to access dignity, recognition, and protection under law.
In a very short intervention, you have, I guess, summarized all the major issues that are likely to happen if this amendment actually becomes law. I mean, it has almost become the law. The president has signed it. It's just a few basic formalities left, and it does um, you know expose us to very serious implications. Maybe here we can hear from you, Dr. Sharma. You are hearing from Omo about all sorts of violations of human rights that are likely to happen. And here, maybe you can draw from your experience as a medical professional and perhaps reflect a little bit on the status, or what's the framework which the doctors at present have in when it comes to looking at healthcare needs of intersex people, and how does the law come into that picture? Because the law is actually providing an alternative view that is like looking at intersex people from a human rights perspective, whereas perhaps the medical profession, or let's say the academic world within the medicine, is still trapped in the medicalized frame. So yeah, any thoughts on these lines?
Thank you, Prashant, and uh, gratitude for giving me this platform to speak. I'm just going to take you back a little bit towards how we viewed this entire diversity of human form and perception. Because you rightly said, 2014 was a landmark year for us. And but there is one fact that I want to highlight. In 2014, we were looking at diversity more from a social angle. Even the word transgender, the umbrella, and the minority sexual identities, they were all being looked from a social kind of lens. We did have, some part in our medical curriculum which talked about uh, at that time ambiguous genitalia. And this was known to be a sort of an emergency which neonatologists would face or the gynecologists would face. And they had devised a sort of a protocol as to how to handle this issue. But this has to be again taken in the social context where the parents would want to know what is the sex that is assigned to the child who's born, and more so, what is the sex of rearing that they need to do. So the protocols were designed in that manner. We also had this issue of not understanding body autonomy very well. So this is round about the early 2000s that was happening in the social world was more advanced than the medical world. Doctors are actually slightly divorced from society. We enter into medical school, barely adults, like at 17, 18, we are entering into medical school. And then we have a top-down kind of teaching which happens. You really do not understand or you do not have the experience of life experiences. and you are more tuned to what is theoretically taught to you. If society does not view diversity well, then the parents who engage with the healthcare providers, they make demands on the healthcare providers to take the view, and very rightly, this is where prejudice and preconceived ideas that doctors have about how society, whether society is ready for this or not, this all starts. It was only in 2018 that WHO, announced that uh, as far as the human form is concerned and human perception is concerned, it is diverse as the diversity is a rule in nature, and so is it with human forms. And they categorically stated that gender incongruence, that is the term they used, because gender incongruence covers the entire spectrum of all conditions which came under the transgender umbrella. They said gender incongruence is not a mental health issue, and they moved it down to the sexual health section for ICD 11. So 2018, precisely 18th June 2018, this announcement was made for the first time. So I will bat for the medical professionals like me who were barely adults when we started our medical training. Uh, that we saw that okay, there is now evidence which says that there is diversity of human form. It says that gender incongruence is not a disease, and we did away with gender identity disorders. We also had a shift here where the WHO said that sexual orientation is also not an issue with the deaf doctors, and this they had announced earlier too, but it was reiterated here. The third change which happened was that WHO started looking at health from a viewpoint of the of it being a human issue, of the rights based approach, right? And they were talking about body autonomy to tailor the care to the person for whom you are giving. So this shift had happened in 2018, and by beginning of 20 uh, 2020, we were ready for ICD 11 to be implemented. I'm talking about ICD 11 because ICD 11 has categorically given different classifications for gender incongruence in adults, gender incongruence in children. That means they have recognized that incongruence is not something which drops suddenly in adults. It is a condition, it's a human condition. They gave another classification as gender incongruence not specified, and they have given a separate ICD number for variations in what we said was conditions which arise from sex development, and which is colloquially known as intersex or intersex variations. And you rightly said that these are very many, and not all of them can be identified at birth. Why I stress this identification at birth is because in India, even in 2026, we have the majority view that diversity is actually pathology. This is the social
Mm,
view. The medical view is still to translate because somewhere there was a gap that we did not pick up. That if the ICD 10 has changed to ICD 11, then don't we need to change the diagnosis or the conditions which have been altered? And more so, since WHO had put out statements, it had issued directives to the governments which are signatories of WHO, that you need to now orient your health system. That means there was also the need for medical education to happen, and this is the step that we missed out. We
mm,
were lucky that we had the TG Act coming in 2019, and for whatever the flaws it had, the rules made some corrections. we were lucky that we had some judgments from which happened in 2019 from Madras, which recognized that intersex children should not be exposed to surgeries at a very early age before they are able to give their consent or at least state their gender. These are very progressive things. With the coming of the TG Act, Prashant, we started educating the medical fraternity. We also started building up systems. This amendment has derailed that entire thing. Not only has it created issues with intersex children and adults, because these are more than 40 variations, and you can't recognize all of them in childhood. And rightly said, these are conditions. These are not disorders. These are diversity of sexual development or sex development, as we say. So this is the viewpoint which has been missed by the government, which is still stuck with the colonial mindset of looking at diverse people as something the society is not ready for. And traditionally, these children have been, thrown out of families, have been left to fend for themselves, no jobs, no, social rights. Medical provisions limited only to the period when they were visible, and that is only in the small window with neonates and the early ages that pediatricians see. Thereafter, they disappear. They do not appear in the medical healthcare facilities. And because we don't see them, we forget what we read in our textbooks. Because after all, you tend to look at what you see more commonly. And since there is no stress on continuing medical education, there is no stress on training, this whole mess has appeared. It seems that there is a disconnect between the Ministry of Social Justice, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Law. And there is unfortunately a disconnect between the doctors who are working in the government setup, because they feel obliged to follow what the government is saying, and the disconnect between private practitioners who are looking to give care if it fits the law. And that is a very dangerous thing to happen.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for giving us the context and perhaps also like the origin story of how these conversations have been having are going on within the medical space, within the WHO, and you're right. Like it did seem like for a while that we are after the Madras High Court judgment regarding conversion practices, right, and then the Arun Kumar judgment, then the even the Supreme judgment, even though it didn't deliver on the question of marriage equality, but it did contain several, recommendations for the government to take forward to at least recognize the rights of the broader community. But yeah, it seems like we are just take one step forward and two steps backwards in this entire conversation, and there is certainly lack of coordination within the government, and and I don't know who else is to be blamed here, because it is supposed to be the government's job to actually coordinate this conversation. And it's not like we are living in a space where we don't have experts to consult with. I mean, there are several medical professionals like yourselves who have come out so strongly in support of the community, and even the expertise within the community needs to be utilized in whenever you're exploring anything of this nature. Otherwise, I mean, India was getting so much praise on global platforms because of these progressive measures, and now we are, going back on them. I mean, so we've discussed the issues with regard to this amendment, and I did have a number of questions actually about what all is possible. But I do want to spend a little more time on just exploring what all could be done from an advocacy standpoint, because we are looking at a quite a bleak, future. And here, maybe Momo, you could talk to us a little bit about what are your observations regarding mobilization, how it has been going on till now? As someone from the community, what kind of a support that you would like from stakeholders? And yeah, what would be your perhaps approach regarding the next steps for mobilization and advocacy on this?
Thank you, Prashant. I think we have been like talking within the communities, and there's a couple of lawyers reaching out. There's always this curiosity of, oh, this is a competition, everybody has to jump into the bandwagon of putting out petitions together. Oh, what is this person doing? What is that person doing? I think the curiosity of that is very good, but at the same time, it is setting out very unrealistic expectations on people who have historically no presence of power in spaces, in advocacy spaces in India, to give out their opinions and being heard out to. When this started happening to me here in the local context of Karnataka, what I started seeing that I had a lot of things to share, but there were very few voices that were willing to listen to me. So, in terms of mobilization, in terms of trying to bring people together, I find that particularly challenging because they're like, oh, it's just one person talking. It's the and then that's when you start realizing, oh, there are real fragmentations within the community. You're like, everything's gonna be smooth sailing, it's gonna go in the direction that you want, and then you see that, oh, people are actually more politically fragmented and undecided over what route to take, whom to sort of prefer in their spaces, whom to invite for consultations, etc. In recent times, when there was a Delhi consultation and I was invited for it, I attended it. I also got an opportunity to speak there. Uh, the aftermath of that Delhi consolidation, I've faced a lot of doxing. I faced a lot of threats. I face a lot of, and this came from all political spectrums, left, right, wing, center. And at the time where I felt that there had to be need of community mobilization, collective mobilization, putting your differences aside for once and at least coming together and recognizing that there's real harm that's being done to our everyday livelihood. I saw that there were questions of why did you go there? What was your motive of going there? Can you explain your reasoning of going there? And I'm like, do other prominent people, marginalized people, do they also have to go through these explainers? Do they also have to keep constantly explaining why did they go to a specific, consultation or a holding of a space because they went there? And do they get that kind of, questioning? And my answers have fallen flat. I have not gotten responses to those questions yet. But what we are seeing fundamentally, Prashant, is also that the community is coming together in some way or the other. What we are also looking at is there is, if not via the intersex community directly, there is some interdisciplinary interventions that are being made. There is networks of lawyers being made that are coming in support for the intersex people. There's a network of ally activists who have been working, behind the doors all these years on different forms of, access of creation of justice networks, etc. We've also seen more youth being curious and involved in the conversations. Alongside this fragmentation, I'm seeing that there is people DMing us on Instagram trying to understand, oh, can you tell us more about this? We want to know what's happening and how else can we support, how else can we work alongside your movement. There are journalists who are very now interested. I find it very exciting. At the same time, I tell this, all these years I've whined about saying that, oh, intersex people have not gotten recognition. There is no one, nobody cares about it. Suddenly, everybody starts to care about us, and it's not necessarily in a good, positive limelight as well. Because everyone's like, oh, so your identity now has become like a framework trap as well. Because you're getting so much recognition in the eyes of law, right? So, like, what are you going to do about it? Are you not going to file a petition or it? So, I think it's really, it's a really complex space also to be in because you want to say a lot of things, but you also don't want to misinterpret those words as well. So, our silence is not coming because we want to be silent, it's just because we want to observe everything and then put out our statements as well. And I think that politics of backfiring, backlash, the loopholes, people not willing to understand that. Because everyone is in this rush of let's file petitions, let's go move forward, let's see what happens. I don't think we should, take that route of mobilization. We have to look at the impacts of how things translate for us, document, and then, work things methodologically as well. Because all these years, the people who have worked behind the scenes, doing so much work, it just kind of washes away on their approach, on their work that has been done, just because we are in this haste of this urgency of doing things. Yeah, this is what I can think at the moment.
Thanks, Soman. I mean, certainly, it's sorry to hear the experience that you've had in participating in these conversations. And as a lawyer, I can perhaps affirm the hesitation that you have in taking the strategic litigation route. It is usually it's become our instinct to take the legal or judicial route to solve major societal problems, but we see how there are severe, downsides to it without creating that consensus, within the relevant stakeholders. If we go down the legal route, it gives us some satisfaction that we have won some rights from one organ of the government at least. But when it comes to implementation, we fall back. Well, there's one more interesting point that you mentioned about that there is some solidarity which is emerging within several stakeholder groups, and here I should also like mention a very important editorial piece which Dr. Satyendra Singh wrote actually, that the disability rights community really needs to take cognizance of what is happening here, because I mean, while challenges of both the communities are different, like the intersex community and persons with disability, but at the core of it, it is the lack of adoption regarding the social model of disability. I mean, there also it's the medicalization which is having such a severe impact. And this is where maybe we can bring in you, Dr. Sharma, that the community of medical professionals here certainly plays a crucial role in informing the court about, okay, what is the kind of lens or frame that we should take when it comes to transgender people, when it comes to intersex people, because healthcare is a major component of this entire advocacy, right? Legal rights are one thing, like getting sex characteristics and gender identity as a protected ground of discrimination. That's something which the lawyers would have managed anyway, like expansively reading sex and all, it could have managed. But the healthcare component is so crucial. So they here, maybe you can share a little bit from your experience of having organized so many trainings for medical professionals on the TG Act. What are you observing, or have things changed, and what are your thoughts on the this amendments impact on the work that you are doing with the medical community?
Okay, so I'll speak about the impact first. The immediate impact of this amendment was that there's a clause 18 which puts a fear of litigation and criminalization for anybody who sets out to provide care to people who are diverse. Let it be. And since this definition was tampered with, suddenly the word transgender did not match gender incongruence. Now, the healthcare providers were slowly, learning this new language of gender incongruence and ICD-11, and now they are told that there is a certain way that you need to treat people who fall under this social definition of transgender, and you will be part of a medical board. You will be the people on whose shoulders the gun will be fired to decide who will be the beneficiaries of the schemes that the government has put out. And the schemes that the
Mm,
government has put out is Smile Yojana and Ayushman Bharat medical insurance, and it has shortlisted some hospitals which will provide care. They have also, and these hospitals are largely private hospitals. Uh, so, see, look at the irony of stuff. I talked about no training, no education earlier. You have now a social definition which is divorced from the medical definition. The immediate effect was that the healthcare providers stopped giving care. 13th March is a date which marks the onset of a public health emergency. And the definition of a public health emergency is any sudden event which impacts the health of a large number of people. And see, this was impacting the mental health, physical health, and social health of more than 2 crores of Indians. The prevalence of gender incongruence itself is about 1.6 to 2.7% of the population. Of intersex people is close to 1%. Now, just imagine the number of people who are impacted. Also, there is collateral damage because all those people who were going to form the support system, and these are natal families, adopted families, NGOs who set up support systems. Now, if they come forward, they're going to be penalized. And it is not a small penalty. It is equivalent to that if you commit murder, right? You get life imprisonment. So, and if you have good behavior, you get away after 10 years. So, 10 years is what you're going to serve. And you have a fine of 5 lakhs there. You also have built up healthcare systems. If it's a private practitioner, this chap has probably taken loans, and made this thing. Now, this is open to being brought down on the basis of one complaint. So, what we said, let us work with first dispelling this fear. And what we started doing was reminding the medical care providers of the oath that they had taken. Above all, do no harm. It is your medical ethic to provide care. And I am an allopathic doctor. I follow ICD 11. If it is gender incongruence, that is, a person who's coming to me, he fits into this classification of ICD 11, then I will give him care as per that. Transgender, the way you define it, is a social definition. It does not match what I am doing. I will give care for gender incongruence. I will continue giving care for the ICD number that is given for those 40 variations of sex development, right? This is how I will proceed. And this is what we started telling people. You'll be surprised to know that more than 6 organizations, and these include plastic surgeons of the country, aesthetic surgeons of the country, clinical psychologists. Uh, Obviously, Ati also put out their position statement to stand, to call out to the government that please take down this act. This is not scientific. This is going to create chaos. There is a statement which is being put out by the public health experts who are talking about this public health emergency, right? And they are calling upon the Ministry of Health to stop being silent about it. Take ownership, pass directions. Because if you do not pass directions, then you alone will be causing so much more harm, right? Doing nothing does not absolve you of the fact that you are causing harm. So we are calling out the government to, at least the Ministry of Health, our National Medical Commission, to step forwards and give directions to the healthcare providers that do not stop care. Prashant,
Mm.
there was a question which was raised in the Rajya Sabha, and to which the minister had replied that we are not asking you to stop healthcare. But then the Ministry of Social Justice is not talking to Ministry of Health. If the minister has said so, then why hasn't the Ministry of Health put out the directions? And above all, there is uh, this is a privileged information which like lawyers have with their clients, the doctors or healthcare providers have with their care seekers. I do not breach that confidentiality unless there is a crime that is going to be committed, unless there is a
Mm.
medico legal issue. And for it
Right.
to be announced as a medical legal issue, the law ministry has to, direct the medical jurisprudence, which is the laws governing medical practice, to publish it and then give directions as to what kind of reporting will be done. Ministry of Social Justice has no standing in telling doctors how to treat a medical condition, right?
Hmm.
Uh, this is beyond their mandate. They may carry on saying what they want, but till we do not get directions from the Ministry of Health or the National Medical Commission, which who regulates how we practice here, we are telling the medical care providers, please follow the ICD limit. There is one more thing that we are pointing out, that this amendment, you know, uh, is damaging the international reputation of India. I have represented India on the World Professional Association platforms, and I've stood with pride and told them, "Look, we have an act. You are still struggling with, abortion laws and all those kind of things. Here, we are talking about human-centric care. We are, putting it through the public health system. We have an act which says gender is self-affirmed." And why I talk about these three things, because these are the three criteria which decide whether your country is doing human-centric care or not. The first criteria is whether your country recognizes that gender is self-affirmed. The second criteria is that whether your country uh, gives gender affirming care to a public health system. It is not enough to just say, fine, we recognize this thing, but not create a system in the public health care modality where 90% of people are going to come and seek care. Not everybody is privileged to fly down to Thailand for care. This care needs to be given to the larger majority of people, right? And the third thing is that, does your country have laws which protect the rights of people who are diverse? Prashant, unfortunately, we have crossed all three boxes. Today, India stands behind Pakistan in the list of countries. It stands in line with countries which have death penalty for people who fall in under this umbrella of transgender, as was put in Nalsa. If you are diverse, you have no place in the mainstream society. And this amendment puts us back. See, I will again bat for the government, because probably all this is coming from a space of ignorance, because the
Yes.
bureaucrats, they decide what the policy is which will govern how the care is given, and they do it with arrogance. They do it with that colonial mindset of saying that society is not ready for this, ignoring that this act, and especially TG Act 2019, when it came out after debate in both houses. And it was a prolonged debate, not like how the amendment happened, right? It, in fact, went through multiple stages of discussions. There was then again, we when we approached the ministers and the bureaucrats with the facts, they listened and they said, "Okay, fine, we will make amendments in the rules." Though they were not perfect, right? Perfection will can never be achieved, but they were listening. They were, looking at evidence. And hence, we are doing one more thing, Prashant. We are asking the community to start building this evidence. Pre 13th March, what was your experience? Post 13th March, what is your experience? We need this data to be put in front of the ignorant bureaucrats. Uh, uh, you know, the judiciary is above everything, and it is rightly so, because if you have to frame a society, then you have to give the judiciary its due. But if the judiciary is going to listen, then we need data to be presented to them. And another thing that Momo said, and I am a diehard optimist. I think the one good thing that happened from this amendment was that it got the community together. We are now speaking to each other. We are looking at the human element. We are looking how to make this uh, care politics proof. Because in 2026, with cutting edge technology, we are no longer talking about health as a system which gives cure. We are now talking about care and wellness. And this shift is what is needed to be continued. And the most uh, issue is that if, as a doctor, I do ethical care, I'm going to be punished. If I do unethical care, I'm going to be punished. Uh, this situation has to be sorted out by the government. The Law
Certainly.
Ministry, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Social Justice should talk to each other and decide that are we going to bring India down to behind Pakistan in the international stage, or are we going to reclaim our position of leaders of diversity? We have given such long interviews, we have opened our hearts to journalists, but has that translated into articles in the newspapers? Are they on page one? Has
Hmm.
anybody put out an editorial to shake the conscience of the greater majority, to remind them that, look, care of the minority is your responsibility and it's not reverse. The
Right.
onus of giving care to people who are marginalized is your responsibility. I I have a family. If I have a child who requires special attention, the responsibility of giving that rests on me as the head of the family, not on the child to keep crying. And I will justify that by saying that unless the child cries, the mother will not give milk. That is not a stand that we need to take. Sorry for going
No,
overboard
I
with
know. Thanks a lot for
your. Yeah.
it's certainly quite an alarming picture that you've painted. It is, we are either living in a public health emergency or we are very close to one, given the kind of legal framework that we have set out. It's quite concerning to hear that the doctors are going to be punished even if they provide ethical care. That is certainly not what one had in mind in 2026, given we were perhaps on a progressive path. But yeah, thanks a lot to you both. I mean, I wish we could go on longer, but I'm sure that the process which has started, like with the mobilization, it grows stronger, and perhaps the governments also take note of it and see that there is enough evidence now. And this is where one should also mention that perhaps as coming from the regional organization, it is certainly we are looking at trying to generate that evidence, trying to do that research which can inform government when it comes to policy making. And this amendment certainly needs to be studied in the same manner, that we have to examine the situation before 13th and post 13th March 2026. So thanks a lot to you both for sharing your perspective in such a candid manner. I know we don't have any perfect solution to this, but this is not the kind of problem which can be resolved in one conversation. It's quite a polycentric issue. But yeah, I guess as we continue to raise this, and as these conversations reach those editorial pages of leading newspapers in leading medical journals, I think we will reach a point where there will be that consensus in favor of intersex and trans rights rather than against it. On that note, thanks a lot to you both. This brings us to an end of another episode of Inter Perspectives. Please do subscribe to Intersex Asia's channel, and look forward to another episode very soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prashant. Thank you,
Thanks a
everyone.
lot. Thank you.